good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Uh, Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. I'm curious to know where you're from and maybe your instrument and why you're here. Um, this is one of my favorite topics, actually, the idea of storytelling. And for a few reasons. But one of them is the feeling that sometimes people get detached from that idea of storytelling, of being involved emotionally even in music. Um, I'll do more about that, but let's just start. What's a story? Okay, these are not definitions, okay? It's just ideas that I put down. I gave a lecture like last week, and people started taking pictures of my presentation. I thought, oh my God, this is really, I'm not committed to this, okay? I mean, I am very committed to this, but it's not definite. There are more things to talk about. But things we find in story, there is the expected versus unexpected. And that's something that, if everything is expected, if there is nothing surprising or happening, then it will be very boring. Of course, there is no story really. If I tell you guys, I woke up this morning and I entered my car and I drove into town and, we ate something, we went back, there's nothing there. If I tell you that I took my car and started driving and then I saw a dinosaur, that would be a story. It would also put a setting into the story, right? You know that we're in a fantasy world or something like that. On the other hand, if everything is unexpected, then it's boring as well because we cannot follow. And in fact, I had a music teacher at Mannes College, a professor for composition. He said that he thought a lot of the value of a musical piece has to do with the ratio of expected versus unexpected. So that's something to consider. So of course, there's an element of surprise, and I think it's a bit different than something that's unexpected, because surprise is when you set an expectation and then you break it. And then there is tension and release, and this happens both in the micro and in the macro, right? We have, if you think of us going to a movie, even if it's very tense, it's usually not tense from beginning to the end. There are parts that are where there is a release of the tension and then something happens. And of course, in musical pieces, this all goes also for classical music, needless to say. Usually we have various moods. Sometimes we have many kinds of moods. It's rare, I think, to find a story or a musical piece that has the one single mood from beginning to end. And usually if it does, then it would have shades of that mood. It would not just stay the same. Now we have section types. We have some kind of a frame, right? We say, it was a Sunday morning, everything was calm, just like, I think frame is the literary term. And then we have an opening, we have a build-up, we have climaxes, we have closure. And then something that's very nice about stories is leaving out information, giving the reader something to complete. And I think even more so in movies, actually. My favorite example is if you think of a movie starting, someone is at home, there is a knock on the door, opens the door, and you see a person there, and the person is completely wet. I mean, drenched in water. And then our imagination starts working like, hang on, what just happened? Did he walk for an hour without an umbrella? Did someone pour a bucket of water over him? We don't know what happened, but we start completing the story. We don't know what happened there. And that's crucial for the engagement of the listener or the reader or listener of music or story. Now, there is a sequence, and it's always interesting, both in music and in some stories, what would happen if you would change the sequence of events? Would it still work? And sometimes yes, sometimes really not. So something, again, to consider. Then we have the storyteller, someone who gets the text already, and hopefully the storyteller understands the story. Theoretically, we can have a storyteller who does not understand the story. It can be very amusing. We know, I'm sure you have anecdotes about that. I think it happens a lot in music, especially in classical music. People play pieces that they don't really fully understand. They don't understand the background or all sorts of things. I'll just give you one example that jumps to my mind about a student who was very good, and then I asked him to play, to prepare Water Games by Ravel. Where is it? And he came back and he played. He had never played impressionistic music. He played romantic music, and so he played these lines as romantic lines. And of course, it happens when people cross over from classical to jazz and so on. So there is understanding of the story, understanding of the setting, understanding of the style. There is the emotional intent. We want the storyteller to be involved, not to the extent that he becomes the character and starts crying himself, because he cannot actually tell the story, but he has to get the emotional intent of what's happening there. Again, this is something that we all hear, I think, in music, that people are not fully there with the intent. It does not match, and then it does not work for us as listeners. Storyteller use intonation, and the intonation tells us a lot. Of course, it has to go with emotional intent, but I think it's also a separate thing. And then there are these stops. I was looking for a word there, but I was not sure what. Maybe you can offer me a word in English for that. You know, when we maybe pause or halt in the story and create this feeling of something that's about to happen. Repetition. Storytellers will repeat information. Sometimes it's written in the story, but sometimes just because we think it's an important thing to do. An important thing to do. So we repeat, and sometimes we would accent something, of course. And something unique when we have an audience, we allow for response. However, by now I'm quite a seasoned Zoom lecturer, I can say. I try to leave time for responses also on Zoom. Not easy, because I cannot hear guys, I cannot hear you, I cannot see all of you, but it's kind of crucial to give people the time to digest, to react, to laugh, whatever it is that they do, just even to nod. So, and all of these things I think are applicable in music as well. But I would like to move on for practical tools. So, again, not complete, but an idea about hierarchy in the way we perceive music and we perceive literature as well. I think the goal for us when we write a piece of music or a piece of our story, we tell a story, we perform a piece of music, or we improvise, is to get some kind of a message across. I hope that all of you have been in situations, in musical situations, where you left, by the end of the piece, you felt that something happened. You received something. In some cases, we have concerts that we cherish and remember all our lives because they were so strong. There was a strong experience there. And I think it's fair to say that the experience is a result of sequence of emotions. And again, the word emotions may not be strong enough or fully encompass everything that we feel or that happens there. But there is some kind of an emotional journey, I think, that takes place. And it happens both in music and in story. In the story, it can be the plot. It can be other things as well. In music, we don't really have the plot. We have all sorts of musical devices. So we can play, if we talk about classical interpretation, that would be all sorts of the way we pace our crescendo, the way we do accelerando. It can be the balance of things. Within the piece of music, we can get, for example, a feeling of loneliness if you have something like this, as opposed to this feels lonely because there is nothing around the melody. The melody is far away from the accompaniment. It feels lonely. All these kind of things, musical devices that create these emotions. In jazz, it can be many other things. We'll go over them, of course, very, very soon. And then kind of at the bottom, the building blocks, okay? Musical cells, I call them. Again, I'm looking for a word for that. It's not even melodies. It's 3-4 notes. In stories, it's sentences, not even phrases. The kind of sentences and musical building blocks that if you take out of context, they're not special at all. You know, we read a book, we take out the words and like, okay, we can all use these words. It doesn't make us authors. So, and same in music. I know people who take and transcribe solos and then you take your favorite part of the solo and it goes, and you go, oh, well, hang on, it's just an octave. So yeah, if you break it that much, it's a building block. It's crucial though to understand that we need the building blocks. We cannot do it without. We all have emotions, we want to express them, but if that's not there, we cannot do it. Classical music performance, it would be probably things like dexterity of fingers, fingerings, pedals, all these kind of little things that we end up practicing a lot. So this in itself, this slide can be a topic for half a lecture at least, but we're going on because this is just an idea. So I'm going now to talk about musical devices, but I think it's really important to remember they always serve an emotional intent. Otherwise, they're almost useless. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is because I have heard and I keep hearing people use musical devices without that, and it just does not work, at least for me. I hear people when they feel that they play a solo on a saxophone or something, and then they go higher and higher and higher and higher, and then there is a very dramatic pause, but it doesn't feel like they really meant that pause. It feels like someone told them, you know, at the end of the run, you really should have a dramatic pause because it really works well. And this reminds me of someone who was doing auditioning, and he said that you can always tell if someone, I think it was for singers or for actors, said you could always tell if the person going on stage had done a class of how to audition. So if someone did a class of how to audition, it's not that they knew better how to act, but you could see that they had a class about this. It's still, you cannot fake that. So I think the important thing when we improvise jazz, we have the freedom actually to follow our intent and not the intent of the composer. And it's important to think of the intent and then fit the musical device to the intent, and not the other way around. Not think, well, I would like now, I'm playing this, and I really feel like playing out of the key. It would not make sense if I'm not feeling, if my feeling is to play like this, something very simple, then doing this. Just does not sound congruent. Is that the word? Congruent. Forget the word. Anyway, so devices. I'd like to start with a list of how to vary things. Just a short list. We have sound. I include also pitch and left hand in that. We have complexity of various aspects. We have the use of time. And of course, all of these are in order to create variety and intent. So if I'm excited, I can maybe do something more complex, or actually something more simple. I can use some of that. I can increase the sound, I can use the left hand differently, and so on. If I'm more hesitant, I can use time differently, and so on. Let's start with sound. By the way, feel free to ask questions, okay? Again, I see faces. It seems that you're following me, but you're welcome to question either in the chat or even use your voice. So we'll start from sound. Of course, lightness versus heaviness. I think this is different than loud and soft, okay? So very often, I'll speak about the piano. I think most people, and actually other instruments as well, they have a typical sound. Someone like Hank Jones usually plays with very light sound. Almost as if he does not even push the keys all the way down. Chick Corea uses a lot of accents and all the way down, definitely. Kind of slapping technique. McCoy Tyner goes very, very fast into the keys. Oscar Peterson, again, kind of pushing the keys down and goes really, really fast to the next key. So he gets these kind of runs. He does not wait for the key to go up. Art Tatum had the same kind of technique. Bill Evans changed his sound when he was in his beginning of his career. It would be more around this. kind of feeling the bottom of the key. It's creating very present sound, and also his sense of time was like that. And then later in his life, also more pedal. Came lighter and more flowing. Keith Jarrett uses legato, which is unusual for jazz. Very much kind of talking to you and not letting go. And of course, there are also things about fashion. There are people who can vary this sound and use that, but that's, again, not as usual. Of course, the volume of playing, single voice versus octaves, not that much in use in jazz, usually only in climaxes. Or but still worth mentioning. Articulation is an interesting thing because mostly, again, certain players are associated with certain articulation where the default is non-legato. But then if you do, you can change the articulation all of a sudden and create something very different. And the swing feel, that's, again, it can be a huge topic, but let's talk about what's swing for a second. So swing in jazz is the term that describes the inequality of notes, right? We have long, short, pappy, dappy, 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 that. It's not a dotted 8th and 16th, of course. So it's and it's not triplets. I know it says in many books that it's triplets. I tried. It's not. Triplets would be 1, 2, 3. Yep, but up. It feels a bit like circus. So it's something that's not as dotted as a triplet, but it's not. It's there. Buddy. But the thing is that it's not even a constant because I can play. That's more dotted, or. And more than that, I can be on top of the beat, right on the beat, I mean. Behind the beat. And go back. And it can create different moods. There is a lot of tension from when you go from. This is almost equal eights. Pa, 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 pa. Creates tension because we do feel the rhythm as pa, pe, da, pe, da, pe, da. And the equal eights go against that. So it's something that we can use. Now, more practical things that are easier to control. Register. This is a really funny one because it sounds obvious. However, I find that a lot of my students tend to just play in one place. Now, years ago, I read that most of Mozart's themes on the piano are written around here. Right? This is the place where the piano rings the most. And by the way, interesting fact, there was a time where Steinway pianos actually voiced down this octave because they knew it was going to be overused. Kind of silly. So we pretty much had a piano that sounded not good for a while until it opened up. So, but it's just to show you how much this was the range. However, we have all this kind of at least half a piano, right? I play the chords here and I can start melodies here. And diverse things that have to do with register. But if I just give you an example, I'll play, let's say I play All of Me and I start improvising around this octave. Right? This is a tune. Sounds very refreshing. and then I went to the other octave. Now, of course, it was kind of superficial the way I did it, but the interesting thing is that this is something that we can use, and very often I find that performers forget about it. And usually if you look at music analysis, we talk about pitch compared to the chord and all sorts of things, but not actually where it is. And practically practicing this, kind of getting our ear to notice where we are, can be very, very useful. And sometimes even something like this, just doing that. Okay, I changed the motive a bit because of the chords, of course, but just switching register can be a lot of meaning. Now, pitch range, it's related to register, but it's a bit different. I just played within an octave pretty much. This octave, this octave, this octave. But I can also do this. For a while, let's say I'm staying within an octave. And then I do something like this. So my range is much bigger. It's actually way over any range of a singer, right? I mean, there are not many instruments that can actually just do 3 octaves like that. And again, if I go back to Bill Evans, in his youth, you would hear lines that are much more constrained within an octave or two. Well, I think the Paris Concert Edition 1 from '79, he started solo on the first tune. Something like this. It's like in 4 bars, it goes up and down the entire half keyboard. And the entire solo has this air of flying. And a great choice that we can use. Now, direction. This is one of the funniest one. I guess I keep saying this about everything, but this is really funny because sometimes I ask my students, you know, I'd like you to pay attention when you improvise, whether you're going up or down, just in pitch. If this is this, you know, oh, or if it goes up and down, or down and up, or if it's kind of stationary. And by just asking them to divert their attention to that, all of a sudden, they play differently. They're much more committed to what they're playing because they're thinking about it. And it's not that they ask them now play 3 times up and 1 down or something like that. It kind of happens naturally. And it's interesting how easy it is to play without thinking about it. Now, obviously, direction is not an arbitrary term because when we get excited, we usually go up in pitch, and when we wrap it up, we go down in pitch. So it goes directly with the way we speak. It's way beyond using different harmonies and rhythms and all of that. It goes straight to our speaking voice and listening to speech. Not sure I'll include it here in direction in case I did not say it later. Something I noticed in a different Bill Evans solo where I helped a student analyze, we noticed that when he goes up, he goes quickly, and when he goes down, he goes slowly, meaning down, up. So it would go up in like 1 bar and then down in 8 bars. And later someone told me that he heard that this is usually the case. And at first I thought, that can't be such a generalization. But then I thought more about it and I realized that, yeah, most of the time this works really well. It's very effective. And it ties up with things that happen also in classical music. If you take this. Right? Chopin goes up in a 4th and then stepwise. 4th. Something happens a lot in classical music. Also when you analyze larger forms, you see that there is almost a resistance of going down, which almost symbolizes fate. So we go up and we try to just stay there and not go down. So it may be related. This way or another, it's usually very effective to go up quickly and down slowly, which also means it can be very effective to do sometimes the other way around and break that expectation, right? Okay, interval size. This is an interesting one because you can be in a range of what I said, like 3 octaves, and still use very small intervals. You can be in a range of an octave or so and do. And again, this is tied directly to the way we speak. If you stand outside a car and someone has the radio on there and someone is speaking on the radio, we cannot really hear the words, but you can often hear like something like this. But we can tell if it's news or if it's a commercial, because the news would be. The commercial would be. Right? Today only, and you have these large leaps. And again, it's super effective as an expressive device because it goes directly to the listener's very almost primal way of communication. Okay, this is for pianists, but I think most people here are pianists. So how we use the left hand. Intensity. Some people kind of hardly use it. Not meaning not necessarily they don't play a lot of it, but okay, so it's kind of there doing its thing, and so it's a matter of sound and presence. And now the left hand can have various roles. It can be just kind of rhythmic feeling, like you have with Red Garland. He has this thing of sometimes playing on the end of 2 and end of 4. And it's almost as if the left hand is part of the drum set. Drum set like so just kind of feeling the rhythm. And it can also feel the rhythm differently, right? Something I find is very effective, especially when playing Latin rhythms, is have the left hand feel the rhythm whenever we have a long note in the right hand. If I do this, yeah, triste, that's the name of the tune. Whenever I have a long note, so it's not really responding, it's kind of just feeling the rhythm. Whenever there is long note, it comes there. Especially effective if we're playing without a drummer, when we need that extra feeling of rhythm. Now, it can be participating. In various things, we'll see in a minute. And just emphasize. Now, if it's participating, it can be responding, it can be leading, it can be in dialogue. Let's look at each one of them. Responding. Yeah? Yeah, man. Great. Okay. Can also lead, which is not as usual, but can be very interesting. Let's again go to All of Me. Now, of course, it's a bit a matter of, the chicken and the egg, who comes first, because it's one and then the other. But the real thing is who plays first, left or right, when the chord changes. If I do ba 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 ba, new chord. If I go, then it sounds like my right hand is leading because it was the first one to present a new chord. But if I do this, and of course we can reverse the roles, right? But it can be very interesting to start with the left hand leading and then the right hand taking over. And then it can be in dialogue also. Almost like equal partners. Now then there is the question what we actually play with the left hand, right? We can do what we call shell voicing, right? The third and seventh of the chord. I'll do it with the right hand so I have the bass there. You can have tensions. 4 notes, that's typical. It's not for today's topic. All sorts of can color everything differently, of course. Any questions so far? I'm not sure if I'm going quickly or slowly for you guys. Okay, I'll go on. Again, anybody wants to comment, just drop it in the chat. Now, use of time. This is interesting because I often hear people, yeah, you need more space. But, you know, space is not something that you kind of inject. There is a reason for the space. And the space is something between the phrases. And the phrases are made of notes. And the question is how long the phrase is. We can count it in notes. And we can count it in bars. Completely different. I can have very long phrases with long notes. I can have short phrases that have many notes. So let's see with notes. If I do this, 3 notes. Let's do 4. Okay. But I can also think of bars. If I do 2 bars, it's going to coincide with the chords here. There is a typical thing that happens in music all over the time, both classical and jazz, doing 2, 2, 4 or 1, 1, 2. If you do this 1, 1, 2, it kind of sounds very almost satisfying, right? Or 2, 2, 4. And then but now I'm going with the bar lines, with the phrase line of the tune, but I can do 2 bars starting on bar 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, now 2. Let's do 3 bars, now 1. Okay, so that's a different position of them. And I can also position them differently in the bar. And the interesting thing is how far it takes me from the tune. If you look at this tune, all of me, for example, it's so funny seeing it on the page because you see like note and then the triplets and then and then a note. 4th bar is empty. 4th bar. If I improvise like this, empty, it sounds like really old jazz and everybody can follow the melody, but the question is whether this is the purpose. If I really want to tell a story, I would be somewhere else. I'll just use the chords and place things example. Okay. Now, space, again, it has its own thing. I think it's almost like two different things. You can use space just in between, but it can have its own meaning, let's say, or significance. It's one thing if you just end a phrase and I need a space after that. Ba, ba, dee, ba, boo, ba, doo, beep, ba. Boo, da, beep, ba, boo, ba, dee, ba. I need to breathe. Ba, dee, ba, da, ba, dee, doo. Do, da, da, be, doo, doo. Now I need a big breath. Makes sense. But sometimes I can actually use space as its own expressive device. After some time, it has a meaning of its own. If you ever look up, I keep going back to Bill Evans for some reason today. I mean, I love him, but I listen to other people as well. Bill Evans's performance of Minority. He starts this solo, I think, with at least 4 bars of space. So the melody ends, there is a big drum roll, then one, chung, 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 nothing happens. And then all of a sudden he plays something really quick, and then stops again for 4 bars, and blah, blah, blah. And space is really one of the elements of the solo as a star. Okay, complexity, rhythmic, melodic, harmonic. Each one of these elements can be very simple or simplistic or very complex and anything in between. So I can play, I feel like changing a tune. I'll do all the things, okay? Relatively simple rhythm. Ba-dum da da da. Ba-dee-dee-da. Dee-ba-da. Ba-ba-da. 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 Rhythmic shift already. What do you call it? Disposition already. Displacement. Makes it a bit more complex, right? More complex. Now, I would never start a solo like this, okay? And I'm not sure, I would probably not also go in kind of direct line going from simple to complex, but it's something I can use in my solo. I find that very often it has to do again with kind of tension and release. So if I do okay, so after something more complex, I wanted something ba 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 more simple. So there's some kind of a balance. I think, at least from the way I hear music, I find that if I use any device too much, it just loses the point. The ear gets used to it. So if I go on crazy rhythmic things, after a while, okay, it loses the potential to create an effect. The question is how long, of course, we keep it for. Now, melodically, I can stick to notes, to things that are more simple, notes from the chord, right? Let's say I add notes from the scale. And then, now I can add notes that are chromatic. So they're outside of the scale. Simply lower neighbors, or approach if you want to call it the jazz lingo. Um, Now, this is tied with the harmony, of course, because I play over the harmony. So now I'll switch into thinking about the harmony. I can take it a bit outside of the harmony without getting into too many details, but if I take a chord and I add notes to the chord, instead of playing on these four, 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, I play on the 3, 5, 7, 9th. Upper structures, which are triads made of tension, of notes that are not in the original chord. And maybe go outside the harmony completely. Go back. And as I'm demonstrating this, thinking of, there is an album of Keith Jarrett at the Deer Head Inn. If you don't know the place, you'd go there. I was there once. It's a really nice, nice club. I think it's in Philadelphia. I'm not even sure, or New Jersey, South New Jersey. Anyway, that was where he played his first gig. And then years later, he went back there and recorded an album with Jack DeJohnette on drums and Paul Motian on bass. And one of the tunes is a blues in F major. And at some point he uses tritone substitute. So instead of, he goes. So he basically plays everything a tritone away from where it's originally, where it began and where the bass player plays. So Gary Peacock plays there in F, and he plays in B major. Super cool. But then I remember listening to it, and after, every chorus is 12 bars because it's a blues, and it goes on and on. And at some point I'm like, okay, it just, at least at home, I was not in the show. Maybe in the performance it made sense, but at home, it just sounded ridiculous after a while. It was overusing. For me, it was overusing that effect. It just lost the idea. I could hear him playing in B, hear the bass in F. Again, as I said, in my the way I hear music, I like to have these as, and then go back, and maybe. So I use these as devices rather than just stay there. Okay, so that was my rant about that. Okay, now, again, all of these are here to help us deliver some intent. Then we have the mood, intensity, and of course it goes hand in hand with the mood, but it's something different because sometimes we have a feeling that we're in a certain place. So we selected the mood and we are in the mood. This is a mood. Right? And this is a mood. And then sometimes we are in some kind of a growing or shifting of moods. So if I go back here, so I used various devices. I double timed the rhythm, of course, but I'm in transition. But then I can also get to a new mood. So it's different than being in a mood. It's growing or fading from one mood to another. Now, sometimes I like to think of it as developing an argument. There is opening, developing, closing, and all the things that have to do with argument. During the Baroque era, they looked at music like that, as building an argument. And I think for me, again, it's something very powerful. I think of it when I start a solo. Let's see, I'm in a group and we just finished the head. Solo piano. So the way I start is obviously an opening way. I would not close my solo like this. At the end of the solo, this sounds like the ending, right? Okay, I feel like this is endless, although I wrote it myself. Thank God. So we have all these musical ideas, and we can call them. Yes, someone wants to ask a question.
Everyone's okay, Bubs. I'm a little sick.
Okay, that was not for us. Okay, so motives or ideas. That's the notes themselves, right? If it's this, or and sometimes it's difficult to say what's coherent in ideas, and I often play this game with myself and with my students. I say, I play something, you play something, and as in conversation, sometimes someone says something and the person agrees. I say, it's really cold today. It's like, yeah, cold. So they repeat some of what I just said. Sometimes they would just nod. Sometimes they would say, no, it isn't. It was not that cold. It was colder yesterday. And sometimes they would just like hear it and say nothing and move on to the next topic. And it's all coherent, right? It can all be part of a legitimate, good conversation. I'm mentioning this because sometimes I hear people who think that I used to be like that. They hear something and they repeat it. So, have good ears. So I liked showing off like this. I would play that idea again. But then that can be so annoying. Just think that you say something and someone just repeats it. Right? It's very, very kind of takes you off your flow. So we want something to react differently, and we should react to ourselves, because otherwise we just have a bunch of ideas that don't necessarily make sense. If we take a book and we draw some sentences out of it and we just mix them in a bowl and we just like start reading them in a row, they're not going to make a story. And again, it's not as clear with music what is coherent, but I think when it is, we all feel it. If I do, probably your creative mind already made up something that went with that, right? Or all of these are possible ways to go on. Using different kind of techniques. Oh, thank you, Mark. This is beautiful. Thank you. I'll watch it later. Now, a sequence. The next topic we have is sequence. Sequence in music, of course, means when we have like this. So the musical meaning of a sequence, but there's also a sequence of events. So that's what I just talked about. But a sequence. In classical music, usually the magic number is 2.5. Okay, we have something like if I do this is already too much because it's kind of predictable. This is better. So the second time the brain says, oh, I heard this already. Cool. Third time it goes like, Oh yeah, I know it. Now it's going to, oh, it's not. It's going somewhere else. So if you look at Mozart, most of the sequences go 2.5 times. Also Bach. Vivaldi usually overdoes it, for our ears at least. Interesting that it depends on the quality of the idea. Sometimes the ideas are so good that we actually want to repeat them more, aside of the fact that sometimes they're used for modulation and then they have to go on longer. But if I do this here, for example, that's already too many times for me. So it's very powerful because I create an expectation and then I break it. Okay, next one, super strong. I got this. I have to give the credit to Hal Galper, was my teacher. Incomplete ideas. Do not complete the idea. Okay, so last night I opened the door of my bedroom and in front of my eyes I saw, and I don't tell you what I did, right? I saw something that I could not believe was there. Because the last time I had seen it was, and again, I can stretch it more and more. And ideally, if I complete my sentence, I do it in the next paragraph. So, you know how when there is some kind of a TV series and at the end of the episode, something happens and you don't know, and they leave you like this in suspense. So instead of, sure, again, something like this. Okay, and what it does, it gives some kind of expectation and it gives the audience, the listeners, some time to complete or try to complete and think what's going to be there, and then we play with that. Now I can also space that idea instead of and I would like to tell you one of the things I'm most proud of was an arrangement I wrote years ago for a vocal group I was directing, and it's on the song "The Masquerade Is Over," So they have what we call a shout chorus, where it's like an arranged solo that they sing, and it goes like this. Now this phrase again. Sorry. At the beginning was something like this. Okay, it was 2 bars long. It became. And I remember sitting in front of my computer using the Sibelius notation software. It was a short phrase, and then I would think like, this is not convincing. I was studying with Hal at the time, and I started like moving it on the page, dragging it, and making it longer and longer and longer, and then it became what it is. Very, very effective. Sorry, I have to say I'm not sure what I meant, what I had in mind when I wrote a combination of ideas. So I'm just going to skip it because whatever it is, it sounds obvious. If it gets back to me, I'll say it. Now, framing ideas. That's a very important concept of using time. Again, it has to do with space. But if I have something like this, now obviously it was terribly boring rhythmically, it was all 8s, but on top of that, maybe there were a few ideas that were good in there, but since they're not framed, we don't know what they are because there is no beginning or end of the idea. If I do this, how are these ideas, I mean, where one ends and one begins. I'm not sure. If I do this, it's almost like reading something with no punctuation. And I'm sure you've come across places where there is no punctuation and you get completely different meaning because of that. So framing of ideas can be done, of course, with all sorts of devices, not just space. But it's important to remember that when we improvise our ideas, the listener does not know where one ends and one begins. And again, I don't know if it's so common in English. I see it in Hebrew all the time when people text each other, young people, then they use no punctuation at all. And I ask a student, okay, do you want a lesson? And they write me, not next week. When I mean not, I mean no in Hebrew, it's the same thing as not. Next week. They want the lesson next week. This means no, thank you. I would like one next week, but there's no punctuation, so it's like not next week. Well, I didn't ask about next week. Same happens in music. Okay, now the part we've all been waiting for, right? How to practice all of these things. There are many, many concepts. And I'll give you a few ideas. The first idea is they change every 8 bars. I found this to work pretty well. I demonstrated that earlier with the register thing. I take something that I'd like to include in my improvisation, some concept. Let's say play within the chord and outside the chord. So I play only chord tones. For 8 bars, and then I add notes. And what happens, I think, is that the ear gets to acknowledge that difference. The ear gets used, I think 8 bars are enough for the ear to kind of live in that space. And then all of a sudden we realize how big a change it is when we change an aspect. Again, with the register, with time, whatever it is. As a result, later when we play, and we want to sound simplistic, automatically we would do that. Not upset like, well, now I'm going to improvise for 8 bars on the chord tones, and then I'm going to do something rhythmically complex and go up the scale and to the highest register of the piano. Hopefully, when I improvise, I only think about how I feel and what I want to emote and share with people. So I'm thinking like, lonely, as a result, I play fewer notes because I practiced 8 bars, very short phrases, then 8 bars, many very short phrases with very few notes, and then 8 bars with more notes, and so on. So I know how to use these devices. Now, another one of my favorite tricks is to do 4-note phrase. It's good for many, many things. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is always a question how far we can plan ahead. And when I start a solo, I don't know where I'm going to end up, not even in 8 bars, okay? Hopefully I have some kind of an idea. But if I manage to plan 4 notes ahead, which is not that easy, by the way, the last note has to belong to the chord, which means that the note before that has to lead there. So it's not that simple. No, it's simple, it's not that easy. But as a result, I can later make longer phrases that are actually 4 and 4 and 4 and 4. No one knows that this actually goes in my mind as some kind of a mechanism that I trained, and it gives a lot of focus. So it's one of my favorite ways. Now, another way to practice a trick is to stick to one motive, which is not really possible, okay? So, but we try. So I go... Then I changed a bit. And I let it morph slowly. This helps for coherence, okay? Now, if you find that you keep playing on the same place, as I mentioned before, the rhythmic idea, that's even while playing. I play something, and when I want to play something that's a I do. I just wait half a bar or even more. Very effective. And the nice thing, because it's waiting, I don't have to plan it ahead of time. Just when I want to say something, I'm waiting and then saying. And then sometimes the harmony would change, which would force me to be creative and change the notes as well. Do not complete ideas. I mentioned that. Now, it's a bit tricky to practice because we tend to actually complete the ideas, but after a while we get used to it. And what often happens is that when we do that, we feel like something is taken from us. It's like I'm just about to say something and but I want, so I do complete my idea just later. I get to complete it. Just the next bar, a few bars down the line, next chorus, at some point I can do that. The thing is that emotionally, it's almost more important to have the expectation than to have the idea itself. Okay, we want the listener to be engaged and see what else we have to say. If we give the information, that's too much. I think, speaking of Miles Davis, I think that he always gave a feeling that he's about to play something wonderful. I'm not sure he ever played it. He just died, passed away. But there was always a feeling that something is going to happen, and that's actually the magic of his playing. And if I take the other extreme, I think that Oscar Peterson, for me, I lose interest when I listen to him because I feel that he's about to play something and he plays it. He always completes his ideas, and therefore I lose the interest. It's still beautiful and it's great, it's wonderful, and it's perfect in a way, but it's not that engaging like that. Okay, this is a simple trick that I use sometimes. I respond to the melody. So I think to ba to da ba to da ba 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 dee da do. So first of all, it's a nice creative tool, but it usually means that we're going to play in very strange places. So if you just listen to me playing this without me humming the melody, it would sound like I'm playing in the wrong place of the phrase, which can be very interesting. I can also have an imaginary friend. Doesn't have to be the melody, right? Then people say, oh, you take so much space. It's so nice, expectation. Well, actually, I didn't take space. I had a friend, or I had myself. When we're in social circumstances, hopefully we don't say everything that comes to mind. We do some editing. People who say everything that they think usually have very few friends, right? We don't want that. So I can think, then later it sounds much more interesting because I'm leaving space. And then I mentioned it earlier in the coherence. I respond to my own last phrase as if it were someone else doing it. This is fascinating. I do it a lot with my students. I don't tell them ahead of time. I play a phrase, they play, I play, they play, and so on. And they all usually play so much better. And then I tell them, okay, now I'd like you to play and imagine you heard me play and respond to that. And the interesting thing, first of all, they play better, but it does not sound like call and response. It just sounds like a long, coherent solo. As a listener, you could not tell that this is actually the process that's going on, a dialogue. It just sounds like one person. It's the same instrument, the same person after all. Now, last, I mentioned the 8 bars earlier. You can do more sometimes. If you want to incorporate some new element, saturate your ear. Again, it does not take that long in my experience, both as a player and as a listener. Let's say you take something like a double neighbor or enclosure in jazz lingo. And and then you play regular solo. Most chances are that you'll end up including what you just practiced because your ear is saturated with it and it wants to hear it. It's like craving it. Okay. Okay, this is it for today. So I'm now going to present my full-length course. But before I do, if you have any questions about this, please put them in the chat or unmute yourselves. No. Okay. So some of you already know, some people are in this group already enrolled, I see here. But nevertheless, I'm going to tell you about my course. It's called Unveiling Jazz Improvisation. And it's live online. I have up to 16 participants already, some spots taken. Live meaning like this, okay? Not pre-recorded. We'll have 12 live lectures, about 1 hour each, I guess like today, an hour 10, once a week. We have group coachings once a week, depending on the number of participants, between 1 and 2 hours each. So each person gets a chance to play through the assignments. Each one also gets 6 one-on-one tailored meetings. So whatever, if you feel like you need more time with me, we book a time, just the two of us. We can also work on other things. I've had people in the past who did the class, but then wanted like coaching on something else that has to do with music. And I was happy to give it to them. Even I think one of them had something that was not directly connected to music, more about career choices, whatever. This is your time with me and you can do whatever you want in it. And for the duration of the course, this is available for you. And of course, you get everything written and recorded, all the assignments and supporting material. The course is basically for beginners, but I've had very experienced improvisers who really enjoyed the methodical way. Also for teachers, it can be good, but just reviewing everything and getting organized with the material. So we have melodic elements. I mentioned if you hear double neighbors and so on, all sorts of rhythmic principles, syncopations and so on. Lots of harmonic concepts. That's the material we deal with when we play jazz. So you have all these progressions. Although once you know to improvise, how to improvise on one of them, you can improvise on them all. But I think it's very good to know them separately and practice them. All of this is done by working. Also accompanying configuration. All this is done by learning tunes. Basically, in every meeting, we'll have some new tunes. Each tune has a harmonic progression or rhythmic or some idea that where we can utilize all the information that we go through. Where the idea is eventually to be able to develop a compelling solo. So I would say if everything I said in this lecture belongs pretty much to the end of this course, okay? Because in the course you learn how to do the building blocks, being able to improvise, make up a melody on a set of harmonic progression, set of harmonies, so you can actually later take all these other tools that I mentioned today and create your solo. So 12 lectures, 12 group coaching, 6 one-on-one meetings. And also, I think until tomorrow, we have 8 bonus lectures added on various topics in jazz, 6 additional one-on-one meetings. So basically you can have one every week if you'd like. And well, it's not going to be the first 6 because already some have enrolled, but there are still some spots to receive ongoing feedback. So that's the opportunity to actually send me a recording on WhatsApp of you playing, and usually within an hour I can listen to it and send you feedback, unless it's nighttime for me and then you'll have to wait a few more hours. Can be very, very useful, so you don't end up drilling the wrong thing for a while. I value this by $4,000 and I think it makes sense. But the price is $1,000, and today and tomorrow for you guys it's $697. Okay, just when you apply, put the offer code STORY because this is today's theme. And of course, if someone thinks that they did not get what they want, they get the money back guarantee. I have done this course I think 5 or 6 times. There was one time I refund somebody. She was just, it was not the course for her. her level was not, she did not play as well to actually do it. And I did not pick up on it when we first met on Zoom. So after like 3-4 meetings, she said, this is not working. But other than that, no one ever asked their money back. But so I'm not concerned, but I would like you to be happy. So now I'm giving you here this is the link, uvmethod.com. You can check out all the information is there. There's much more information there. You can hear me play. You can see some, what do you call them? Testimonials of past students, and also the syllabus is on the website. So this is it. Comments, questions?
Yuval, do you know the exact date or dates or times of the week when the lessons?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Yeah, I should
part?
have said that. We're starting on Thursday, February 1st. It's going to take place on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 9 p.m. Central Europe. Okay, 12 weeks. The group coachings will determine the time once we have all the participants, and we'll see. It did happen in the past that they had to actually do it twice a week, break it, because there was no one time that we found for everybody. But I make sure that everybody gets their time with me.
Do you have this overview? What is in the course as a slide or something? Or
I can share the screen. Let's see. Just 1 second. If I do this here, thanks for asking. Okay, and then I'll do here. Hang on. I have too many windows open here. Okay. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my course page. This is me. Ha ha ha. Okay, so contents are here. This is the outline.
Oh, it's all here. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Okay, so you can see it on the page, all the modules. I mean, this is as much as I could get within one line per lesson.
That's perfect.
Okay.
I
so
just didn't
and I think yeah, I also had one. I'm not sure. No, I think I closed that link, but how it's organized by the dates. And the idea, it's 12 weeks. Just because you asked, I'll mention another thing. There are 2 times where there are no assignments. So there are lectures, but there is no new information for you to practice, because I saw from my experience after 4 weeks, people usually need another week to get everything down. So we have group coaching, we meet and all of that, and we have a lecture where I talk about some other things, but I'm not giving new information so people can implement that. And this happens again, I think after week 7 or 8, for the same reason.
Yeah. And what will be the last day of the course?
Let me open my calendar here.
Well, it's just 12 weeks, so I can.
It's 12 weeks. Yeah, you can calculate.
Yes, it's okay. I can calculate.
Yeah, I think it's April. Something April.
That's fine. And you said that somebody that it's also for beginners, but still somebody was not at the level to.
No, it's for beginners in improvisation, not for beginners at the instrument.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
This woman she understood the concepts, but she was a beginner piano player, so she was putting a lot of time into it, but it was really not. So yeah, so she felt frustrated with that. Okay, that's why I also encourage you on the website, if you'd like, you can always book an appointment with me on Zoom, and we'll talk and we'll see if it makes sense, if this is the course for you. Some people did ask me to have something for like this course. I may do that, some kind of a preliminary course for this, but not yet. Maybe next time. Okay. Well, great having you all here. Feel free to contact me through mail or Facebook or whatever. I don't know exactly how each one of you got here. And I hope to hear from you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.